I'm going to tell this straight like I'd say it sitting across your kitchen table with a cup of store-brand coffee. I clean houses for a living. I raised my daughter Ava on my own. And the day I walked into the ice house on Crestline Heights, a place so quiet people held their breath in the driveway, I heard a sound no one had heard there in 5 years. The owner, Graham Voss, spoke out loud, and it started because my 4-year-old wandered into the one room I was told never to enter. Yeah, that happened. And if you've ever been told to be invisible to keep your job, you know exactly where my heart was sitting that morning. The rules were printed in a little binder. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't step into the West Wing. Don't linger. And Ms. Pike, the housekeeper with a spine like a yardstick, slid me a look that said I was lucky to be mopping marble at all, but daycare flooded. I had no one. So I brought Ava, tucked her in a supply closet with crackers, and Captain Waffles, her bald stuffed rabbit, told her to sit tight and be a statue. 5 minutes later, the closet was a crime scene of crumbs and no kid. So I followed the one sound. The house wasn't supposed to make a laugh, rusty and shy, and pushed open the heavy door to the study. There they were on a Persian rug, my kid coloring a crooked sun onto one of his sleek blueprints, and Graham, the billionaire ghost himself, sitting cross-legged beside her like a dad on a Sunday. And when I started apologizing in a whisper, he lifted a hand and said, voice rough as winter gravel, "She's fine. Let her finish." And I swear, you could feel the walls exhale, you know what I mean. After that, the messages started arriving around 3 each day. The study, if Ava is available. Always typed signed V. And the first afternoon I brought her back, he met us in a gray sweater with sleeves pushed up like he'd been doing something normal. "She's here," he said, still careful, like words were heavy, and Ava marched past him like a tiny mare and flopped on the rug, Captain Waffles under her arm. And that turned into paper cranes folded with surgeon hands, magnifying glasses in the garden. Tiny expeditions locating ants and snails, like they were royal guests, and I stood at the doorway, trying to act like furniture, while he learned to laugh with his mouth instead of just his eyes. The house changed in inches. Tulips in the foyer, music low in the parlor, a tray of cookies he burned and kept anyway. And the staff who'd been moving like ghosts started humming again, except Ms. Pike, who told me in a tone that could bruise fruit, "You're forgetting your place," and I said I was following his instructions, and she smiled, the way paper cuts smile for now. I had my own lines I wouldn't cross. Don't say Mira's name, don't touch the wound. Until one afternoon, Ava fell asleep in the study, tiara slipping marker on her fingers, and the silence turned full, not empty, and I told him he looked like he wanted to keep the whole world from touching her. And he said I couldn't protect Mira, and said it like the name weighed a pound. And I didn't rush to call it nobody's fault. I said, Ava doesn't need you to catch every sharp corner. She needs you standing in the room when she turns around. And he studied me like he was deciding if I could keep breathing under someone else's grief. The board came next. Of course they did. Voss Systems is a machine that eats headlines for breakfast, and the COO, Porter Hale, walked in with 2 lawyers and a folder thick as a phone book. Hair sharp as a blade, and told Graham they needed a transition because investors prefer a talking CEO. Narratives don't care about spreadsheets, he said, and flicked his eyes at me like I was a smudge. Is this a daycare? And I heard myself say. A child is learning to trust the world again. Maybe so is your boss, and the room went still like a deer in the road. And when Porter pushed for a retirement announcement, I said something my rent couldn't afford. You don't get to retire someone else's grief, and you don't fire a man from his own life, and Porter snarled, Who are you? And Graham spoke clean and steady. She's the person who reminded me I have one meaning, a life meaning a voice. The meeting is over. and Porter tried to laugh until Graham stood like a tide rising and said, "I just did," then looked at me instead of past me and said, "Thank you," and I said, "You're welcome," trying not to shake. Nights changed. Someone tuned the piano, and soft notes slipped down the hall like light. He walked us to the door and practiced sentences like, "Be safe and bring a sweater." Winds up, and I'd carry Ava up our narrow stairs. Later, her cheek pressed to my shoulder, the smell of tulips still clinging to my shirt, thinking how some places thaw one honest word at a time. Then came Ava's 5th birthday, and I said we should keep it simple, a cupcake and a wish, and he looked at me like I'd suggested canceling. Saturday shook his head and said, "She needs a day that proves the world is bigger than what tried to scare her," and the backyard turned into a humble carnival. Bounce house squeaking like an accordion, lemonade sweating in plastic cups. A lavender playhouse he built with his own careful hands. Her name carved in the door. A butterfly cake that was more love than perfect. And when he tapped a glass, the air gathered itself. He cleared his throat and said, "For 5 years, I lived underwater." Sound reached me bent and late. Then a small person wandered in with a rabbit, who's seen better days, and asked me why my buildings looked sad. A laugh rippled like people were afraid to scare it off. She brought my voice back. Her mother brought back my heart, and my hand flew to my mouth like it belonged there, and he lifted his glass barely. To the people who show up and don't leave when the room gets cold, and the neighbors clapped, and Ava yelled, "Mr. Graham, that was a real speech," and he laughed the way you do when you forget to hold it in. Months later, the mansion wore a new language. Wind chimes on the porch, a swing from the oak flower beds along the drive. And the study, once a shrine to absence, held watercolor suns and crowns and a crooked family photo, where we're all mid-laugh, not perfect, just alive. And one morning, Ava asked, loud as a siren, "Are you my dad now?" And he crouched and said, "I'm not your dad, but I love you like one. And if you want me to be, I'd be honored." And she squinted, decided that worked, and launched at his neck, while Captain Waffles bumped his shoulder like a blessing. And if stories ended in kitchens with that kind of yes, we'd sleep easy. But here's the twist. You didn't ask for, but life delivered anyway. The market caught a rumor about the birthday speech, and did what it does, panicked for sport. Porter spun up a tale about instability, and a housemaid meddling with leadership used words like unprofessional and compromised, and an emergency board call went out, links flying one of them to the household staff by mistake, so there I was on a grid of powerful faces in harsh office lighting, trying to click away, and Graham turned his camera and said, "Meet the person who saved this company by saving me," and I wanted to disappear, but he didn't let me. And Porter gave the kind of smile you give before you close a trap, heartwarming, irrelevant, and I said without permission from my fear, relevance is whatever you respect. If you respected human beings, this would be very relevant. And he said, we respect shareholders, and I said, shareholders don't build anything. People do, and no, it didn't convert villains to best friends. But it forced a vote into daylight, and bought time to tell the truth in a way numbers never do, and sometimes that's the whole win. The light. So that's the story. A woman paid to be quiet watched a house teach itself to speak. A man, measured by silence, learned to stand in rooms. Again a child asked for the world back, and got paper cranes, pancakes. We forgave him for burning, and a yes that made the adults braver. And if you've ever been treated like furniture, useful, quiet, replaceable, please hear me, you matter, in the rooms where people pretend you don't. And if anyone tries to retire your grief on a schedule, tell them healing isn't a meeting, they get to adjourn. If this hit a nerve, hit like and subscribe, but more than that, tell me in the comments where you land on this. Did I overstep speaking up in rooms I wasn't invited to? Or are rules like that built to keep some people small? Have you seen a company pick image over humanity? And did anyone push back? What wins in the long run in your world? Silence that looks strong, or voices that shake but still show up? I'll be in there reading because your stories make mine make sense, you know what I mean.